She walked into a sold-out arena in New York City, and 20,000 people did something commissioners almost never hear from their own fan base. They booed her. Not a scattered few, not a handful of trolls. An entire building, in unison, telling the most powerful person in women's basketball exactly what they thought of her. Stick around, because by the end of this you'll understand exactly why that moment happened, why it was completely deserved, and why the WNBA might be sitting on the biggest opportunity in its history while somehow finding new ways to waste it. If you've been anywhere near sports media over the last few weeks, you already know the name at the center of this storm, Caitlin Clark. And if you don't know why a commissioner just got booed out of a building she's supposed to be running, stay with me, because this story has layers, and every single one of them matters. Let's set the scene properly. Kathy Engelbert, commissioner of the WNBA, shows up at a New York Liberty game. This isn't a random appearance. It comes days after one of the ugliest, most talked about plays the league has seen in years, an incident involving Alyssa Thomas and Caitlin Clark that lit up every timeline in the country. Players spoke out. Coaches spoke out. Fans were furious. And through all of it, the commissioner's office had been almost silent. So when Engelbert walked into that building, the crowd made their feelings known immediately. Loud, sustained, impossible to ignore booing, the kind that doesn't happen by accident. That's not noise. That's a verdict. And here's what makes it sting even more. These weren't rival fans. These weren't internet trolls looking for a reaction. These were WNBA fans, Liberty fans, people who buy tickets, who show up to games, who genuinely want this league to succeed. When your own supporters turn on you like that, it isn't a fringe reaction. It's a warning sign flashing at the top of the organization. Eventually, Engelbert did step up to a microphone. She talked about toxicity online. She talked about racism and homophobia in the comments sections, called it unacceptable, and said it didn't represent real WNBA fans. And honestly, some of that was fair. There genuinely are bad actors online who latch onto any controversy just to cause chaos. That part wasn't wrong. But here's the problem. She stood there, in front of the entire basketball world, and never once said Caitlin Clark's name. Never addressed the incident everyone in that building was thinking about. No acknowledgement that her league's biggest star had just been on the receiving end of something far beyond ordinary physical play. She talked around it, above it, past it, and never landed on it. That silence wasn't a slip. It was a pattern, and fans had seen it before. So let's rewind to what actually happened on the court, because context matters here. The play involving Alyssa Thomas and Caitlin Clark was seen by millions. Coaches around the league called it dangerous. Fans called it dirty. Indiana's head coach didn't soften her words at all, calling it disrespectful and pointing out the league had already been warned about this exact kind of physicality just days earlier. And what was the response from the league office? A single one-game suspension. That's it. No formal statement defending Clark. No public condemnation from the commissioner's desk. Just a quiet punishment and a quick return to business as usual. Then Alyssa Thomas spoke publicly, and instead of reflecting on the incident itself, she turned her frustration toward Engelbert, saying she'd only been given 10 minutes of notice before facing a wall of media questions about it. 10 minutes. For something that had become a national story. Whatever you think of that complaint, it exposed something bigger. A league office that looked completely unprepared, reacting instead of leading, with nobody steering the ship during an actual crisis. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark never got a public apology. Not from Thomas. Not from the league. Not from Engelbert herself. The same commissioner who found plenty of words for anonymous online hate couldn't find a single sentence to say, on the record, that what happened to her own star player was wrong. That gap, quick to condemn strangers on the internet, silent about a specific player getting hurt on the court, is exactly what that New York crowd was reacting to. They weren't booing women's basketball. They weren't booing the players. They were booing a vacuum where leadership should have been. Now let's talk about why Caitlin Clark matters so much that her treatment became a referendum on the entire league's leadership. In the middle of all this noise, a letter went viral, written by a woman from Australia who had flown across the world, more than once, just to watch Clark play in person. She wrote that she grew up idolizing Michael Jordan and Larry Bird, and when their era ended, basketball lost its hold on her completely. Years passed without her watching a single game. Then, out of nowhere, a clip landed on her feed, a college guard pulling up from 30 feet with total confidence, no hesitation. That was Clark. And that clip brought this woman back to a sport she thought she'd left behind for good. She flew from Australia to Indiana more than once, spending tens of thousands of dollars, all to watch one player compete. And she said something in that letter that deserves to be printed and hung in every WNBA front office. A rising tide lifts all boats. Clark's success was never a threat to this league. It was a gift. Think about what that actually means. Clark's rise didn't take attention away from anyone else on the floor. It expanded the entire audience. It pulled back fans who had drifted away from the sport entirely, and it created brand new fans who then started following other teams, other players, the whole league. That letter wasn't written by a Clark fan. It was written by a new WNBA fan, created almost entirely because of one player's impact. And that's exactly what the numbers back up. Before Clark entered the league, the honest picture wasn't pretty. Arenas that were routinely half full. Ticket prices low enough to joke about. Broadcast deals that barely registered outside diehard circles. Then Indiana drafted her, and almost overnight, everything shifted. Visiting arenas started selling out, not because of rivalry games, but simply because Indiana was in town. Teams were using her as the draw on their own home floor. Ticket prices jumped. Ratings jumped. Games that would have quietly aired on some secondary channel were suddenly primetime events. And here's the part that gets ignored. Every other player in the league benefits from that surge too. More eyes on the product means more sponsorship money, better broadcast deals, better facilities, better contracts across the board. Clark isn't taking anything from anyone else's plate. She's the reason the restaurant is suddenly full. Which is exactly why the reported attitude from parts of league leadership, that Clark should feel grateful the WNBA gave her a platform, is such a staggering misread of reality. Caitlin Clark was already a millionaire before she ever stepped onto a professional court. Her college name, image, and likeness deals, Gatorade, State Farm, a stack of major partnerships, had already built her into a nationally recognized brand. She could have walked away from professional basketball entirely after college and still had a career worth tens of millions of dollars, just from appearances, endorsements, and her name alone. She chose to play. She chose this league, not because she needed it, but because she loves competing at the highest level. That choice is the reason Fever Games became appointment viewing nationwide. Treating that as though the league did her a favor isn't just backwards. It explains almost every other frustrating decision fans have watched unfold over the past year. It's the thinking of an organization that doesn't fully understand the value of what it's holding. Which brings up the question a lot of fans have started asking quietly, and some not so quietly anymore. What happens if she leaves? Not retires. Leaves. If the physical targeting continues, if the league keeps responding with silence and light punishments, if no one at the top is willing to publicly stand behind her, what stops her from taking her brand and her following overseas? Because make no mistake, major leagues in Europe and Asia would restructure entire marketing calendars around her arrival. They would sell out arenas. They would generate international headlines. For the right organization, signing her wouldn't just be adding a player, it would be a business transformation. And back home, the casual fans who came back to basketball because of one viral clip of a college kid pulling up from 30 feet, they're not following the league. They're following her. When she plays, they tune in. When she doesn't, that excitement disappears with her. Those fans don't automatically transfer their attention to the rest of the league. They just stop watching. And then the arenas go back to being half full, and ticket prices drift back down, and the broadcast deals shrink right back to where they were before any of this started. The league existed before her, and it would exist after her, but the real question is whether it ever gets back to a moment of cultural momentum like this one. Moments like that don't run on a schedule. You either seize them or you spend the next decade explaining what almost happened. So back to that arena in New York, because it's worth sitting with for a second. Commissioners don't usually get booed. They hand out trophies, they say the safe thing, they stay out of the spotlight. The fact that fans felt strongly enough to boo her that loudly, in that setting, means the frustration had already crossed over from online arguments into real, physical, in-person anger. To her credit, Engelbert didn't hide from it. She stood there, took it, and eventually addressed the media. And some of what she said was completely true. Online hatred is real. It doesn't represent the actual fan base, and the league does have a responsibility to protect its players. All of that is fair. But you can say true things and still miss the entire point. You can talk passionately about respect and inclusion while staying carefully silent about the one specific situation everyone in the building already knows about. That selective silence is what those boos were really about. Not the sport, not the players. A style of leadership that feels far more comfortable addressing abstract problems than naming specific ones. More comfortable talking about what's wrong with anonymous internet comments than admitting what a single one-game suspension quietly tells every player on every roster, that certain things are apparently fine as long as they don't go viral enough. The WNBA is sitting in a moment it may never get back. The window that opened the day Caitlin Clark entered this league is still open right now, today, but windows like that don't stay open forever. There's still a chance to build on what she created, to turn casual viewers into lifelong fans, to use this attention to spotlight every other incredible player who's been grinding in this league for years without nearly enough recognition. But that takes leadership willing to make hard calls quickly and clearly. It takes a commissioner willing to step in front of a moment instead of issuing carefully worded statements designed to offend absolutely no one. It takes treating your biggest star like a partner in building something bigger, not a problem to be quietly managed. Right now, that isn't what's happening. What fans are watching instead is an organization that reacts slowly, punishes lightly, goes quiet exactly when it needs to be loudest, and only finds its voice when the topic is safely abstract. And fans notice. In New York, in Australia, in living rooms and sports bars everywhere, they notice, and eventually they respond, sometimes with a tweet, sometimes with a letter that goes viral, and sometimes, when the commissioner walks through the door of the arena she's supposed to be running, with a wall of sound she can't talk her way around. A crowd doesn't boo a ghost. They boo someone whose decisions they can actually feel. And in that arena, thousands of people who genuinely love this sport looked at the person steering it and told her, as clearly as a crowd can, that it isn't good enough. Meanwhile, in Indiana, a player who never needed this league to build her future is still showing up, still competing, still filling seats this sport hasn't seen in a generation. She deserves better than silence. This league deserves better than silence. And if the people in charge of it can't see that, the fans already have.